I didn't mean to leave the path that day. It wasn't some brave decision or a desire for adventure. It was boredom, plain and simple. I'd walked that trail so many times that my feet knew it better than my mind did. The woods had become familiar, almost comforting, and familiarity has a way of dulling caution. It was late afternoon, the kind where the light turned soft and golden, filtering through the trees in long slanted beams. The air was still, warm but not heavy, and the forest smelled the way forests are supposed to smell: damp earth, old leaves, pine, and moss. Birds hopped between branches, and somewhere far off I could hear water moving, maybe a stream or a small river. Everything felt normal, safe. I noticed the smell before I saw anything. At first, it didn't register as something wrong. It was sweet, strangely sweet, like overripe fruit or thick syrup left out in the sun. I slowed my pace, frowning slightly, trying to place it. There weren't any flowers around that should smell like that, not this strong. The scent clung to the air, heavy and persistent, settling in my nose and throat. Curiosity crept in before unease did. I stepped off the main trail, pushing through a patch of low bushes. The ground was softer there, uneven, my boots sinking slightly into damp soil layered with rotting leaves. The smell grew stronger with each step, no longer just sweet but cloying, almost nauseating. My stomach tightened, a quiet warning my brain chose to ignore. I remember thinking I should turn back. Instead, I pushed deeper into the undergrowth. Branches scraped against my arms. Thorns tugged at my clothes. The trees grew closer together, their trunks blocking the sunlight until the woods felt dimmer, enclosed. When I pulled aside a thick curtain of brambles, I saw something on the ground ahead of me. At first, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were showing it. It looked like a person, but wrong, bloated, misshapen, lying at an unnatural angle. I took a step closer before the reality hit me all at once, like a physical blow to the chest. It was a body. The smell exploded in my senses, overwhelming now that there was no doubt about its source. I gagged, stumbling backward, my heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat. My vision blurred for a moment, and I had to grab onto a nearby tree to steady myself. He had been there a long time. His skin was swollen, stretched tight in places and split open in others. The color was wrong, greenish, black, yellow in patches, like something that had been left too long in a sealed container and then forgotten. Fluids had leaked into the soil beneath him, darkening the earth. In places, his clothes were torn open, and it didn't take much imagination to understand why. Animals had found him. There were bite marks, missing chunks of flesh, places where bone showed through. His face was barely recognizable anymore, features distorted by decay. One eye had collapsed inward, the other was gone entirely. His mouth hung slightly open, lips pulled back in a way that might once have been neutral but now looked disturbingly like anger. I felt cold, despite the mild air. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to unlock my phone. When I finally managed to call the police, my voice sounded distant to my own ears, thin and unreal, as if I were listening to someone else speak. "I've found a body," I said. They asked where I was. I tried to explain, naming landmarks, trails, anything that might help. They asked about the condition of the body, whether there were signs of injury. I answered mechanically, my eyes fixed on him even though every instinct screamed at me to look away. Then the operator said, "Can you stay with the body until officers arrive?" I hesitated. I looked around. Trees in every direction. No people. No sounds of civilization. Just woods stretching endlessly in all directions. "I guess," I said, though every part of me hated the idea. They told me help was on the way and to avoid touching anything. The call ended, and suddenly the silence felt louder than before. I sat down several feet away from him, close enough that I couldn't pretend he wasn't there, far enough that the smell didn't completely overwhelm me when the wind shifted. Time slowed to a crawl. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound seemed amplified: the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. I kept glancing at him, then quickly looking away, as if caught doing something wrong. The sun began to sink lower in the sky, shadows stretching across the forest floor. As the light faded, the woods changed. The warmth drained away, replaced by a creeping chill that settled into my bones. The familiar shapes of trees turned into tall, looming silhouettes. The undergrowth became a mass of dark, tangled shapes that my imagination eagerly filled with movement. I used my phone's flashlight, though it only made things worse. The beam carved out a small circle of visibility, and everything beyond it felt too close, too hidden. The light reflected off pale patches of skin and wet surfaces I wished I hadn't seen. The longer I sat there, the more my thoughts spiraled. I found myself wondering who he was, how long he'd been there, whether anyone was looking for him. I wondered what his last moments had been like, alone in the woods, surrounded by trees that didn't care whether he lived or died. And then, uninvited, another thought crept in. He looks angry. The idea lodged itself in my mind and refused to leave. His expression, what was left of it, seemed tense, frozen in something like resentment. I told myself it was just decay, muscles tightening, skin shrinking. Science. Logic. But logic felt thin out there, surrounded by darkness and silence. As the light finally disappeared and night settled fully over the woods, fear took on a new shape. Every sound felt intentional now, as if the forest itself were watching me. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to make myself smaller, less noticeable. I kept checking my phone for signal, for messages, for any sign that help was close. That was when I felt it. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure in my head, a sudden intrusive thought that didn't feel like it belonged to me. You shouldn't be here. My breath caught. I froze, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Slowly, I raised the flashlight and aimed it toward the body. Nothing had moved. He lay exactly as before, silent and still. I let out a shaky laugh, trying to convince myself I was just tired, just in shock. Anyone would imagine things after something like this, I told myself. Still, I didn't turn the light away. When the police finally arrived, their torches and flashing lights cut through the darkness like something unreal. Relief flooded through me so suddenly my legs felt weak. They took over, asked questions, and eventually removed him from the woods. As I walked back to my car, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see him still there, watching me leave. That night, when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of the woods. And in my dream, I wasn't alone. I thought leaving the woods would leave it behind me. I thought once the police took him away, once the blue lights disappeared into the distance, I could forget. But the forest doesn't give up that easily, and neither did he. That first night, I slept in my own bed, wrapped in blankets I thought would protect me. My apartment was quiet, normal, unthreatening. I told myself it was over. Yet, sleep came slowly, and when it did, it brought him back. At first, it was just shadows. Shapes moving at the edge of my vision, flickering in the corners of my room. I'd open my eyes, heart hammering, and see nothing but the familiar outlines of my furniture. I tried to laugh it off, blaming fatigue or the stress of what I had seen. But the dreams were different. The dreams were him. He appeared exactly as he had in the woods, bloated and distorted, but somehow alive in my mind's eye. His face was a twisted mask, green and black, parts missing, yet his eyes, if you could still call them eyes, burned with focus. He stared at me, not like a corpse, but like someone who had been waiting, and now he was angry. Why did you disturb me? The voice whispered, not in the air, but in my head. I woke with a jolt, drenched in sweat, pulse racing so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I tried to reason with myself, he was dead. He couldn't speak. It was my imagination. But imagination can be cruel when it's fueled by fear. The dreams didn't stay in my sleep. The moment I closed my eyes during the day, resting, meditating, or just shutting out the world, he would appear. Standing at the foot of my bed, in the corner of my living room, sometimes even reflected in mirrors. He didn't move like a human. He didn't breathe. He just existed there, observing, judging. And he spoke. At first, it was anger. Sharp, demanding words that made my skin crawl. You shouldn't have come here, he hissed. You left me alone, and now I see you. I tried to wake up, to scream, but sound wouldn't come. I would lie there, paralyzed, forced to listen to his rage. Then it turned worse. Threats, suggestions, ideas, dark, twisted thoughts that weren't mine, yet somehow they planted themselves in my mind. And he whispered one night. You think you're safe, but I will find you. You will be like me. I started avoiding sleep, living in a haze of exhaustion. Coffee became my lifeline, sunlight my anchor to reality. During the day, I forced myself to remember logic. He was dead. He could not follow me. He could not speak. But the dreams kept coming. Each night, more vivid, more detailed, more invasive. Sometimes he'd replay that final afternoon in the woods. I could feel the mud beneath my hands, smell the decay, hear the distant rustle of unseen animals. And every time, his voice echoed, accusing, demanding. It wasn't just dreams anymore. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and feel a presence, standing silently at the edge of my bed, waiting. The air would grow cold, a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the room, and for a moment, I was back in the woods, alone with him. I tried everything: meditation, rational thinking, even talking to friends about the dreams. But the moment I described him, even to someone who hadn't seen him, the voice would grow louder in my head. It seemed to thrive on attention, feeding on fear. I realized then, he wasn't gone. Not really. Something had followed me from the forest, something angry, something unwilling to be ignored. I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just imagination. The woods had claimed him, but he had found a way to reach me. And I couldn't escape. The real horror wasn't seeing him. It was knowing that he had chosen me as the next witness. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the corner of my room, waiting for the whisper, the shadow, the unmistakable presence that had come with him. It came, and with it, the understanding that my life had changed forever. The dreams didn't arrive every night at first, and that inconsistency made them harder to prepare for. When I slept without dreaming of him, I'd wake up almost hopeful, convincing myself the worst had passed. Those mornings felt lighter. The air seemed clearer. I'd tell myself that my mind was finally letting go. Then the next night would come. The dream always began the same way. I was standing at the edge of the woods, exactly where the main trail ended and the undergrowth thickened. The light was frozen in late afternoon, that soft golden glow that should have felt calm but never did. The forest was silent, unnaturally so, as if sound itself had been switched off. I would try to turn back toward the path, toward safety, but my feet wouldn't move. It felt like my boots were rooted to the soil, tangled in invisible vines beneath the ground. That was when the smell arrived. Sweet, thick, overpowering. It poured into my lungs until I could taste it, until it coated my throat and made me gag. My stomach would twist, and panic would rise before I even saw him. I already knew where he was. I always did. The dream pulled me forward. No matter how hard I fought it, my body moved on its own, pushing through branches and thorns that scratched and tore at my skin. I could feel everything: the sting, the pressure, the wet ground beneath my knees when I stumbled. It wasn't like a normal dream. It was too detailed, too real. Then I would see him. But he was never exactly the same. Sometimes he lay on the ground just as I'd found him, swollen and decayed, his body half consumed by the forest. Other times, he was standing, whole, upright, his skin still discolored, still wrong, but no longer collapsing in on itself. In those dreams, he faced me directly, his head tilted slightly, as if studying my reaction. He never rushed me. He never needed to. "You remember how quiet it was," he said one night, his voice wet and heavy, like it was being dragged through mud. "You remember how long you sat with me?" I tried to scream. I tried to run. Nothing worked. I was at peace, he continued, stepping closer. The ground didn't crunch beneath his feet. Leaves didn't move. The forest made space for him. "And you ruined that." I woke up choking, my throat raw, hands clawing at my sheets like they were the undergrowth itself. The days became harder after that. I started noticing changes in myself, small things at first. I'd lose time, staring off into space without realizing it. I'd catch strange smells where they didn't belong, brief flashes of sweetness in the middle of my kitchen or at work. Every time it happened, my heart would race, and I'd have to remind myself where I was. I stopped walking near woods entirely. Even parks made me uneasy. Trees felt like watchers now, their branches reaching too far, their shadows stretching too long. I stepped to open spaces, busy streets, places full of people and noise. It didn't help. One afternoon, while standing in line at a grocery store, I felt it again, that pressure in my head, that sensation of being observed from just behind my right shoulder. I didn't smell anything. I didn't hear a voice. But I knew. I turned quickly, almost colliding with the person behind me. A stranger. Confused. Apologizing. I nodded, muttered something, and faced forward again, my hands shaking. That night, the dream changed. I wasn't in the woods anymore. I was in my own bedroom, lying exactly as I was in reality, staring up at the ceiling. Moonlight spilled through the window, casting familiar shapes across the walls. For a moment, I thought I'd woken up. Then I felt the weight. It wasn't physical. Not quite, but it pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The air grew colder, thick and stale, like the forest floor after rain. Slowly, painfully slowly, I turned my head. He was sitting in the chair by my bed. Up close, he was worse than I remembered. His skin glistened, stretched and cracked. Dark fluid traced paths down his neck and arms, dripping silently onto the floor. His eyes, empty sockets that somehow still focused on me, held no confusion, no fear. Only blame. You keep pretending I'm not here, he said calmly. But you invited me. I didn't, I tried to say, but my mouth barely moved. The words felt trapped inside me. You stayed, he replied. You watched. You listened. You were the last person with me. He leaned forward slightly, and the smell hit me so hard I thought I would vomit. You don't get to walk away, he whispered. I woke screaming. After that, the boundary between sleeping and waking began to blur. I'd hear his voice while brushing my teeth, just a murmur beneath my own thoughts. I'd catch glimpses of movement in reflections, windows, mirrors, dark screens, always gone when I looked directly. I stopped trusting my own mind. The worst part wasn't the fear anymore. It was the guilt, the constant replaying of that day in the woods. The way I'd sat there, waiting, counting minutes, wishing I could leave him behind. The thought settled deep inside me, heavy and sharp. What if he's right? That question followed me everywhere. And with each passing night, his presence felt stronger, closer, as if he were no longer content to remain only in dreams. Something was changing, and whatever had come back with me from the woods was no longer satisfied with being unseen. I started sleeping with the lights on. At first, it felt childish, embarrassing even, but fear has a way of stripping pride down to nothing. Darkness had become an invitation. In the dark, my mind filled every empty space with him, with the woods, with the smell, with the quiet accusation that never quite left. Light helped. A little. The dreams didn't stop, but they changed again. Now they felt less like memories and more like conversations. In one dream, I was sitting on the ground exactly where I had waited that night, my back against the same tree. The forest was darker than it had ever been in real life, the sky above completely black, no stars, no moon. I knew I was dreaming, yet I couldn't wake myself. He stood in front of me, closer than ever before. You still think this is about fear, he said. His voice was clearer now, less wet, almost human. It's not. I swallowed hard. Then what is it about? He tilted his head slowly, studying me. Responsibility. The word echoed through the woods like it had weight. You found me, he continued. You became part of it. You were the last chapter of my life, and you want to close the book like it never touched you. I wanted to argue, to tell him I had done the right thing, that I'd called the police, waited, stayed. But the words wouldn't come. In the dream, my mouth felt full of dirt. You think staying was kindness, he said, stepping closer. But you didn't stay for me. You stayed because you were told to. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding so violently it hurt. After that, I began avoiding mirrors. Reflections had started to feel wrong. I'd catch myself looking too long, searching for something behind my own eyes. Sometimes, just for a split second, I thought my reflection moved a fraction too late, like it was considering a different expression before settling on mine. At work, people noticed I was different. Quieter, distracted. I'd lose my train of thought mid-sentence. Sounds would fade out, replaced by that familiar pressure in my head. The voice never shouted. It didn't need to. It waited. One evening, I broke down and searched for answers. Trauma responses, hallucinations, survivor's guilt. Everything fit just enough to be convincing and just enough to feel like a lie. I booked an appointment with a therapist, hoping that saying it all out loud would drain it of its power. When I described the dreams, her expression stayed calm, professional. What do you feel when he speaks to you? She asked. I hesitated. Judged. By him, or by yourself? That question stuck with me longer than it should have. That night, the dream came faster than usual. I wasn't asleep for more than a few minutes before I found myself back in the woods, but this time, there were no trees. Just endless darkness beneath my feet, like soil without form. He stood in front of me, closer than ever, so close I could see cracks in his skin, details I wished I didn't know. You're trying to make me go away, he said quietly. I just want peace, I replied. He smiled, or something like a smile. So did I. The ground beneath us shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't standing anymore. I was sitting beside him, shoulder to shoulder, staring into the darkness ahead. I felt his presence like cold seeping into my bones. "Do you know what it's like," he asked, "to realize no one is coming?" I didn't answer. "I waited," he said. "I thought someone might hear me. Or find me sooner. I thought maybe I'd be interrupted." His voice softened, and that terrified me more than his anger ever had. "You were the first person who cared enough to stop." I woke up crying, confused by the sudden surge of emotion, sympathy tangled tightly with fear. The next few days were the worst yet. I started feeling watched even in crowded places. I'd catch myself thinking thoughts that didn't feel like mine, dark, heavy thoughts that arrived uninvited and lingered too long. I became afraid of silence, afraid of being alone with my own mind. One night, sitting on my bed with every light on, I finally spoke out loud. "I didn't choose this," I said to the empty room. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, very softly, I heard his voice, not in my head this time, but in the room itself. Neither did I. I didn't sleep after that. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure he was only in my dreams anymore. I reached a point where fear stopped being sharp and became dull, heavy, something I carried instead of reacted to. When terror lasts long enough, it reshapes you. It becomes routine. I woke up each morning already tired, already braced for him, already expecting the pressure in my head and the whisper just behind my thoughts. But something was different now. He wasn't angry anymore. He was patient. That realization came one quiet morning as I sat at my kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The familiar sweetness drifted through the air, faint, almost polite this time, and I didn't panic. I didn't even look around. "I hear you," I said quietly. The smell faded. That was when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The more I fought him, the stronger he became. Fear fed him. Guilt anchored him. Every replay of that night in the woods tied him tighter to me. The therapist's question returned to me then, clearer than ever. By him, or by yourself? That night, I didn't leave the lights on. I lay in the dark, fully awake, waiting. The dream came quickly, smoothly, like stepping through a door I'd finally stopped barricading. I was back in the woods one last time, but they were different now. Thinner, less alive. The trees stood farther apart, their shadows weak and uncertain. The smell was there, but muted, no longer overwhelming. He stood a short distance away, not looming, not decayed. As badly as before, still wrong, but quieter. Less solid. "You're not afraid," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm tired." He studied me for a long moment. "You think that makes you stronger. I think it makes you weaker." For the first time, he hesitated. "I didn't summon you," I said. "I didn't invite you. I didn't choose your ending. I did what I was supposed to do, and then I carried it longer than I should have." His voice dropped. "You saw me." "Yes," I said. "And I acknowledged you. That's enough." The forest shifted. The ground beneath him darkened, softening, pulling inward like soil settling after rain. "You stayed," he said, quieter now. "You were there." "I was," I answered. "And now I'm done." He opened his mouth to speak again, but no sound came out. The sweetness in the air thinned, stretched, and vanished. His shape blurred at the edges, unraveling not violently, but gently, like smoke losing its source. As he faded, I felt something loosen inside my chest. A knot I hadn't realized was still there finally gave way. "You don't belong to me," I said softly. "And I don't belong to you." The woods went silent. When I woke, the room felt different. Lighter, empty in a way that didn't feel threatening. No pressure, no smell, no presence waiting just out of sight. Days passed, then weeks. He didn't return. I still dream of the woods sometimes. Of trees and quiet paths and late afternoon light. But the dreams no longer trap me. There's no voice, no accusation, just distance. I understand now that finding him changed me, but it didn't own me. Some things leave marks without leaving curses. Some experiences demand acknowledgement, not punishment. And some ghosts only survive as long as we believe we owe them something. I don't visit that trail anymore. Not because I'm afraid, but because I don't need to go back to prove that I survived it.